Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today, I'm really excited to have on Sam Coffman. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Hi. Yeah, thank you, Mason. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and the flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
I'm excited to get to know you a little bit more. I don't think I've ever heard the origin story of Sam. So what was a young Sam like, and how did you get into this whole herbal medicine thing?
Yeah, so the origin story probably goes back. I mean, in terms of having some affinity or a love of the plant world, goes back to probably being a child. I grew up in a very plant literate family, I would say, in terms of growing our own food. At least we grew and canned all our own food growing up, and everybody was expected to be part of that gardening, the gardening collective. We had a large family starting at an early age. And I remember my mother talking about teaching me, probably maybe 4 or 5, 6 years old. I remember her telling me how the plants that she talked to did better. And so really? I kind of probably always had that sort of affinity, but I really just kind of intuitively came to it at the same time. I had to make a choice between what I was going to do when I was getting out of school with my undergrad degree. I'd been in the military already and gotten to languages, and I got a linguistics degree, and I worked over in Germany as a translator and interpreter for a while, and then got out, came back, and went to school up at CU Boulder. And at the time, I kind of had to make a choice. I wanted to go. Part of me wanted to go to there was a TCM school. It's no longer there, but it was pretty cool. They had a really interesting program. And I thought, well, I really wanted that. I was really into martial arts. I'd been literally doing Qigong even since I was like 13 years old. I had this really kind of connection to that. But I also really wanted to learn. I felt like I wanted to go back in the military, and I wanted that kind of feeling that you get from being paid to be really good at what you do. And I really wanted to go for special forces. So I decided to become a special forces medic. And that's a long journey, and took a couple of years of really getting my body ready for it. Getting through the selection and then getting through the Q course. Even just the medic portion of that is about a year long by itself before you do the other stuff. And it's tough. I mean, we started with 83 in that medic portion and ended with 13 of the original people that started. There were people that recycled back into it, but there was only 13 of us that made it through that in one piece unscathed. And even then, at that time, I was already very interested in herbal medicine, kind of from the standpoint of what would you do when there's no higher care. I broke my thumb, an avulsion fracture, right before the hardest part of that course started, which was called goat lab or med lab, where we're doing the blood is real. It's goats, and they're we're putting them under. They're putting them under with anesthetics and so forth, and then we're doing everything from trauma to long-term care to. You're not allowed to use the word goat. It's your patients, and it's pretty intense. For about 4 months, sleep deprivation, major, and field medic stuff. At the austere medicine, prolonged field care, all of that, and wound care, debridement, a little bit of minor surgery, all that stuff. And so I broke my thumb right before that started. I was out mountain biking in North Carolina, and I had about a week off between the 300, what was then called the 300 F1 and med lab. And like a foosh, falling out, stretched hand injury. And I could feel it. I heard it pop, and I was like in denial, but it was a really very prominent avulsion fracture. And I only knew maybe about 10 or 15 herbs back then, but I knew comfrey and I knew horsetail. And there was a little shop in town in Fayetteville that it was like a new age shop. And I'd been there already. Like when I first got there, I checked it out, and I knew that they had herbs there, and I suspected they had those. So I went and checked, and they did. I went and x-rayed it. We had our own x-ray down there in med lab. And so I could see it. It was very clear, even to my untrained, radiographic eyes. And I went up to the hospital. The doctor there, I had to actually, fill out the paperwork and have it actually treated. And the doctor there, I remember he was a major, and he was like telling me, you need to get this. It's no big deal. You get it pinned. We'll do an open reduction internal fixation is what you got to do if you want to ever have a functioning hand again. And it's no problem. We'll give you a medical recycle. You're in the Q course. I understand. We'll bump you back 3 months. You can jump into the class behind you. And I was like, no, I'm not doing this. I had a son at the time I hadn't seen for like a year, and I felt like just a piece of crap of a dad. And so it's like, no, just put a cast on it, and I'll take care of the rest. And he bitched me out. He's like, "You're an idiot. You'll never have your hand strength back. You fool." And he's like, and I just stayed on it. I was like, I want a cast stock. And technically he could have ordered me to do that, because it's a direct, order from an officer. And he's like, finally, he's like, "Just get the hell out of here. I don't ever, if I see you back here, I'm going to give you an Article 15 for this injury. You fine. You take care of it, you idiot." He's like, "All you special forces guys are just a bunch of crazy assholes. Get out of here." So I went, he's like, "Get it casted and get out of here." So I got it casted and I went back to the barracks and I cut the cast off and went to town, and I got, got horsetail and comfrey. And I knew something about poulticing then. I'd done this like a naturopath, those old school naturopathic courses, I would never even put this on my resume, but I had an actual naturopathic certification, which was almost embarrassing looking back on it, but I knew something. I'd learned a little bit, so I knew something. And, anyway, I poulticed it. So I bought like a pound of each of those two herbs, and I brought them back dried, and I stuffed them under, it was in the barracks, it was on the crappiest part of the base there at that time. And so I stuffed them underneath my locker. I was scared to death they were going to think it was weed. And so I got a bunch of, Ziploc baggies, and we had, of course, unlimited medical supplies. So I had a bunch of, 4x4 gauze. So I just would pre-make like, about a dozen or 20 of these little poultices, with 4x4 bandage, and put them in the bag, and then just keep them in my, my pocket. And then I just wrapped it with ace wrap, and I put the poultice on my thumb. I get it wet. I just go into the bathroom and get it wet with just, water, and put that on my thumb, and then wrap it up with the ace wrap. And I lucked out, and half the class got trauma to begin with, and half the class got microscopy. So I had like about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks that I got a reprieve where I was just using a microscope mostly. I didn't have to do all the stuff you got to do in trauma, which is significant. Like, you do a cricothyroidotomy on a goat like almost every day, and you've really got to have a kung fu grip with your non-cutting hand to grab that trachea and pop it in and get your airway. Amongst many, many other things you need both hands for. And so I had like 4 weeks or so, something like that. And so I went to there, and I kept that wrap on. I changed that out about probably every 2 to 3 hours,
Wow.
And just let that soak in. And, and I did my own kind of physical therapy with it in the evening, before I'd get my 4 hours of sleep or whatever. But yeah, in 4 weeks I was ready to go. I mean, I kept it wrapped. And it hurt. I mean, I'd finish a trauma and I would just be like, it would ache for an hour or two, but I made it, I made it through that course, and I made it through without recycling. And I passed trauma even. And that was huge. And for me, it was just this huge kind of trial by fire, whatever, ritual entry into herbs for me, of saying, yeah, this stuff is for real. It works. And, I had full grip strength within 3 or 4 months. Wow. And, I've never had a problem. So, I have a little bit of calcium deposit there, but never had arthritis. I've never had an issue with it since. So that was, I guess I would say, how I kind of not just came into herbs, but how I really embraced it and realized this is for me.
Yeah, herbs really do work, don't they? Did you learn any herbalism in medic training, like traditional medic training?
Nothing. No, in fact, and by the time I got onto a team and I was working as a medic in SF, I was using it a lot. And my kids, grew up with nothing but herbs for the most part, unless there was some emergency that we absolutely needed higher care for. And I had teammates all the time coming in wanting herbs for their family. And it's like, on the down low, please, do not, like the medical director, MD would have flipped out.
The shit. Yeah,
totally. And even like we'd be on training and be like, have some downtime, and people would be like, other medics would be like, "Hey man, take us on a plant walk, show us some of this stuff." So there was a lot of acceptance in it that helped me. And I even had, some of my own clients. I worked in this little herb shop for a little while during that period of time. And I started the first iteration of our school back then. It was more part-time. But I didn't have the resources or the knowledge yet, but I was very into it. And I just like poured over, my favorite books, and I was out plant walking myself. And I had a friend who was a botanist that kind of helped me a little too. So it was all really, just self-taught and self-experience, and then, family friend. I mean, it's kind of grew that way, family, friends. And then I had my own methodology that I don't like this. I don't like that. This book's great, but this is copy and paste from that book over there.
Totally.
And so it was really getting the experience that is made. I'm a hands-on kind of learner, I think. And that's what I forced myself to do from the very beginning.
I was actually going to ask you, did your military buddies think of Sam as like this hippie dude, or did they respect it? It sounds like they really enjoyed your teachings.
Yeah, no, both. I mean, I was,
Yeah.
I was always kind of the outlier for sure.
Yeah,
But, I'm intelligent, I'm smart, and I have a really
for sure.
smart sense of humor. And so that got me a lot of ways. I'm cynical and all the things that, it's like, I'm always been able to hold my own in any medical conversation at that
Sure.
level. With that, I'm not talking about talking to orthopedic surgeons or something about
Sure.
what they're doing, but certainly at the medic level, I was more than capable of holding my own, even with the senior medics and anything that had to do with pathophysiology, because I was studying all the time, and I loved it. I mean, I loved med. I still do to this day. I love medicine. And a lot of the hardest part for me about going into medicine has been picking my path. I mean, I got into med school when I was 42. I went back to school and got all my post-bac pre-med stuff and got through the MCAT. That was back in 2006. And I got accepted like in 2006 we had to move. We were in Colorado, is where I'm from, but my wife's from San Antonio, is where we met when I was going to the first part of the medic course down there in 1991 or whatever it was. And, she wanted to go back to San Antonio because her mother was getting older, and she ended up living with us for the last 5 years or so of her life. And so it was important to Suchel, my wife, to do that. And so I got into several med schools, but the one in UTESCA down in San Antonio I got accepted there. So I went there, matriculated the fall of 2007 as a 42-year-old, surrounded by like these 23, 24, 25-year-old K through meds, as they're called. And I felt so out of place, and and nothing was really working right. That financially, things kind of fell apart. I had a daughter that rides horses to this day, and she started when she was 6 doing that, and that's what she does as a living now. It was really important that she be able to do that, which is expensive. And so it was kind of like I had to make a financial decision to walk away from med school at that time. So my point is that, I was always been interested in medicine. And like the big thing was making these decisions. And at that point, it was horrible for me. I mean, driving away from med school, I mean, they kept the door open for me for like 2 years after that, because it's almost like the mafia. Once you're in, they don't want to let you out, but it's hard to get in. But so I remember driving away and knowing, I just knew, intuitively I wasn't coming back. And man, that was tough for me. I mean, I wept like a baby I'd done so much work to get there, like 3 years working full time, going to school, evenings, getting all my grades up, doing all the stuff I needed to do. I mean, it was a lot of work and raising a family at the same time. So I was like, what the hell? I got to all to this point and I'm walking away from this. And then like within a month, I started teaching in we lived on a couple acres out in the hill country, and I started doing these classes there, and it just took off like crazy. And then this piece of land, this 50-acre piece of land, literally just fell in my lap. And I was like, oh, that's what this has all been about, is I'm finally ready to open. And that was like version 2.0 of the school. And it was from there, it was just like hit the ground running, and we didn't look back. And it was like, okay, that was a big choice for me, just like making a choice between TCM or special forces was a big choice for me. And it's happened so, again, it's happened to me more than once. I thought about going back to med school, like not even more than 5 or 6 years ago, because they opened a new osteopathic school, a DO school down in South San Antonio that was really cool. I mean, they had a great program that was the kind of hands-on training that I really wished, I could have had at UTESCA. I probably would have, I don't know, tried to figure out a way to stay there though, if that had happened, because it was really good. It's the kind of training I like. And so I thought through that pretty hard, and it's like, no, it's not time. But then the TCM school up in Austin, the Texas Health and Science University up in Austin, opened a branch down in San Antonio. And it's like, oh, maybe it's time. And so then I went, so now I've got my MSAOM. I went to graduated to, from there. It's like a 3.5-year program, trimesters, but I got through in like 2.5 because I was able to, I just stacked my hours, and I was able to transfer some stuff in, of course, too, from pre-med and all that. So that again was another big decision, this or that. And I feel like I'm doing it right now. I made a decision to go back once my wife, who's finishing nursing school right now, getting her RN. She plans to be an NP, but she's just about done with that. And once she's done with that, I think I'm going to go back and get my DAO and my doctorate in acupuncture and oriental medicine, or they're changing it to a DACM, to the verbiage, but it's basically a DAOM, which I think will give me kind of a pinnacle degree in the area of Chinese medicine that allows me to, there's a lot of things I can do with that I think will be helpful to our school in terms of credibility and credentialing and CEUs and that kind of thing too. So that's part of why I'm doing that. But again, it's like I almost considered going to PA school. It's like, well, there's like an online PA school that I could, do all my clinicals here and set them up and everything through Yale. And I was like, man, that's like, why would I do that? Why would I take 2 years of my life and put them completely on hold with where I'm at with herbalism now, which is a long way. I mean, I'm a whole different human being in terms of what I understand and how I work with herbs than I was even 5 years ago, let alone 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. I'm in a whole new area now. And doing the MSAOM has just opened up this world to me that's just incredible. I'm working with these complex cases that before I would have just from a Western perspective, just been, I always call it playing whack-a-mole with symptoms and with hormones and stuff, if you're working with endocrine issues or whatever. And now I'm able to literally have these different layers of both Western and TCM approach that are just it's incredible. I'm knocking this stuff out of the ballpark. That's just like, wow, I never could have done this 5 years ago as a clinician, and now I can. And so why would I put all that on hold to go get a Western medical degree just for some sort of credentialing that I'm never going to use? I would never in a million years be comfortable going and working in a clinic again. I mean, I did that stuff when I was a medic, of course, in Truth Medical Clinics and hospitals and ERs and stuff. And it was great then. It gave me a lot of good experience, mostly ER type experience, and just working, with the Western medical system and knowing, lab work and all that stuff. But where my heart's, I just can't even imagine, to me, the value of that. It's like, it would be like throwing away, this rich kind of just depth in what I'm doing with herbs right now that I never would have imagined I'd be able to do. And of course, I always get the most complicated people that have been kicked around by the allopathic system for like a decade, and just they're ready to try anything. They're ready to do it, So that's usually the typical patient that I usually have. And I probably, I don't know, I probably have like an 80% success rate. And it's incredible to be able to work with that kind of thing and to be at the level of medicine making that I'm at now. I really, it's like these decisions of making, that like it becomes easier and easier to say, look, take a really honest look at who you are and why you're working with plant medicine and what that means to you in your life and your connection to the planet and all of the things that it means to me, and acknowledge it instead of, running back to, allopathic medicine for more credentialing or more credibility, which is, it carries something with it, but it's not, it's definitely just not who I am. And I think I'm old enough now to where I've kind of grown into my skin and become comfortable with that,
Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. Well, constant learning does seem to be a theme in your life, and it sounds like you're back in acupuncture school currently. So it's kind of like a full circle moment for you. You're going back to the Eastern medicine. Why did you decide to become registered as an acupuncturist?
Well, a couple of reasons. One is, first of all, it's the closest thing to being licensed as an herbalist, depending on what state you live in, that you can possibly get in the U.S. Unfortunately, I think that we need licensing for herbalists personally, but I know that probably upsets a lot of people. But I just see too many people, that, in my opinion, have no place really working medicine. Herbal medicine isn't, herbs and in that regard, it's medicine. It's herbal medicine. 50% of that phrase is medicine, and it's really 100% of it is medicine. And so you have to have the ability and the responsibility, and to look at yourself critically and look at what you know critically. And we also need herbalists really need to be able to be translators with the Western allopathic world. Integrative medicine is becoming more and more a standard. I've been working with a functional medicine doctor. She's one of our faculty, Kyla Helm, MD, we've done incredible work together, and we try to work together on a consistent basis, sharing patients, working back and forth. Another MD, Steve Pearson, who also used to be a Green Beret medic and then got into medicine about 40 years ago, went to med school. And so he's been a rural doc up in Utah, and I developed this austere program, the austere medicine program, where it's all about integrating these worlds of medicine, of herbal medicine, and now whether Western or TCM both, and allopathic care in a prolonged field care situation where there may not be any higher care at all. That's the whole goal of that whole program, the austere medicine program. And it's fantastic. I mean, the things that we've been able to work with together. So my point is that I feel like my role has been sort of, I got into the military first because of languages, right? I was really into language when I was in high school, Latin, Spanish, and Russian and stuff. And I went to DLI, or Defense Language Institute, and studied German and got really good. I mean, I was fluent, like native fluent after I lived in Germany a few years. You wouldn't know. I mean, it was like a huge issue for me if somebody discovered that I was American that didn't know me. Like that's how, I always wanted my German to be that good.
Wow.
And so my point to that is that I feel like herbalism in a lot of ways is also your role as a translator, to be able to translate these concepts. So my long-winded point to this is you translate these concepts into the allopathic world so that it's understandable. And in order to do that, you have to speak Western pathophysiology. You have to understand organic chemistry. You have to understand some of these basics that a lot of people don't. So I think that it's important. Like if I were to run how herbalism works in this country, I would require everybody's got to do similar to what you do for pre-med. You need some chemistry, you need some biology, you need some biochem, you need some organic chem. And then from there, then go ahead and come in, and then you need the clinical experience, and you need, after you've learned all the didactic, you need the clinical stuff. And that way, when you're done, you can go and you can work with a doctor, and you can say, and you can translate back and forth. And now that I'm going to go back to school, probably in the fall or in the summer, to get a DAOM, that's what they're all about, is integrative medicine. That's like, got news for you. I've been doing this for 15 years, but this is great that now there's actually, I can get a degree for this, and I can do a paper and a, capstone project and all of that, and actually, be very legit about this. And, because I've been working with people that have, for instance, let's say Hashis, like thyroiditis, and being able to literally see that the approach that I'm working with, which isn't your typical approach using herbs, it's different. The administration routes are different. The herbs are different. And that we can literally turn around and look at the blood test, Kyla, and I can say, wow, in 3 weeks, we've changed their TSH, or in 4 weeks, whatever, and see that, and I've done that. We've done that with so many different illnesses, chronic illnesses, and so forth. So that integrative work, I think, is absolutely crucial to the foundations of furthering where herbalism is. It literally dropped off the radar after the Flexner reports over a century ago. And I think there was a smokescreen, a pharmaceutical smokescreen, that kept us from trusting and understanding what herbalism was for almost a century. And then there was kind of a renaissance and a revitalization through the 60s, and a huge woo cycle that, didn't really help the herbal cause. It just plain doesn't help for us to be woo. And I'm saying I'm a tree hugging, earth loving, I love the planet. And I'm all about it, I commune with the planet. I commune with plants. I talk to them. They're very much a part of who I am. But you cannot go, into a situation with those severe, acute issues or severe chronic issues and not understand what those are. Everybody says, well, red flags, you got to understand red flags. You do. The question is, to what depth do you understand it? Because the deeper you understand those red flags, the more you realize where you can work and where you can't, in little details that really make a difference. I've worked with C. diff with doctors that were ready to put the patient under the knife, where it's like, talk them into 1 more week. I know you've done everything else. You've done all the antibiotics you can possibly do. You've done the fecal, transplant stuff. Now it's down to actually a gut resection, surgery. Give me a week, with my, biofilm inhibitors and the gut and the stuff that I'm going to work with. And I've had 3 cases that have turned around, literally, not all of them at exactly the same spot, but one of them that was literally a few days, a week away from the doorstep of surgery. And docs that come around and say, I don't know what you're doing, but it's working, so keep doing it. So that's what we need in herbalism, because we need herbalism to become a standard that's just a daily standard. And of course, the nutraceutical industry and everything has helped all that happen. This is nothing like 30 years ago, when you had to look over your shoulder about anything you were doing clinically. You didn't know when the FDA or the cops or whoever was going to come knocking. So it was a totally different environment now. And that's because of the $1 billion nutraceutical industry has been a huge part of that. The cat's out of the bag now. It's not going back in. But now I think it's time for herbalism to kind of come out of that 100-year smokescreen of pharmaceutical medicine that it created and understand Western concepts, understand pathophysiology and physiology, and from a Western perspective. And now for me, the TCM piece, that's like, oh my God, it fits in here and here and here, and even using Western herbs here and here. And Peter Holmes' Energetic Western Herbs, in my opinion, is the classic, and I was reading that 30 years ago. It's the only, aside from maybe the occasional Michael Moore, it's the only book I still once in a while refer to. And I'm like, he was so far ahead of his time with that. And it's time for a new generation of that. But it was, that's where it's at, is to be able to look at both of those pieces and add a whole nother paradigm into it. And I'm not saying, there's multiple paradigms of medicine. It doesn't have to be only 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, but those two for me really work well now together to be able to make an integrative jump across for docs. And then so then it's a new assignment, translator assignment for me. It's like, how am I going to explain to this MD what spleen chi deficiency is? I'm not going to use those words. I can't.
Right.
But I can use Western, it's like, so now I'm really working on that side of it and trying to become a translator on that, even though I know in my heart, this is what, I don't have any problem understanding Qi. Like I said, I was doing Qigong when I was 13. When I got into the clinic in my school, they made me kind of be the typical clinical route of, you do observation for whatever, a trimester or 2, and then you get to start working. And of course, there's a lot of oversight. And after about 3 weeks, they already knew me. I mean, they knew about me when I first came in, and they're like, after about 3 weeks, they're like, just go, Sam, just do your thing. And, and then they had to change the rules because so many clients coming in, patients coming in were asking for me. And they had to make it, you can only ask for the same, intern like 3 times in a row. And then, it's got to be up to everybody, all the other students, like, this isn't fair. We're, we keep getting these shitty cases, and Sam gets all these great cases. But it was, my point is that the idea of working with Qi was something that was just like immediately for me. It's like, oh yeah, of course, this is where I started with this when I was 13. And I understand. I mean, honestly, Qigong got me through the Q course in the Special Forces, like getting up every morning, even if I couldn't, even if I only had like 3 hours of sleep, and there was no way I was going to get up early or anything. I would just lie there and just do a certain number of breaths, every day. And when I could, I'd go out and do some Qigong in the woods or whatever. Just nobody ever knew this about me. But I think that this got me through uninjured through assessment selection. It got me uninjured through a lot of the stuff. And even with the thumb injury, maybe it played a role along with the herbs. I don't know. But those are things that I think are truths that sometimes you find even early in life, and then you come back to later and like, I was on the right track there. Why did I deflect myself for so long?
You mentioned healing your thumb, and I was going to ask you this later on. I was going to call this a selfish question of mine, but I tore my meniscus playing basketball. I'm just kind of curious if you have. I've been staying off it for the most part, but over time I've amped up my activity level, and it feels like it's getting stronger. At least my general knee area. Do you have any recommendations on how I could help heal my knee?
Yeah, meniscus is tough, right? Because we can't get anything into there, especially the deeper it is in there, the harder it is to get circulation, and all that circulatory, the synovial fluid is all coming through the bone. So how do you do that? And I'll tell you the best thing that I know of, because I've had one surgical meniscus. I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and so my knees, as much as I tore them up in the Army with jumping and rucks, having weight on my back, nothing really compares to tearing it up on the mats in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I had one tear that got repaired, and then I have another one that's torn, and I think it's the same spot actually that tore. I think the surgery actually weakened it a little. And so anyway, what changed all that for me first for running was barefoot running. I got into that, and so that meant I could run again. And that was like 25 years ago. And then more recently was the whole knees over toes.
Oh, I follow that guy. Yep.
Yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of backwards walking and
that's it.
Deep stretches and stuff like that. I do the reverse calf raises and stuff like that. I don't know if it's calf raise per se, but yeah. So I'm definitely doing a lot of that. So any herbal protocol? Do you think comfrey or something could help? Or
I don't know. I mean, it hasn't done it to me. I've tried
Okay.
that. I've
Okay.
even tried injections of PRP, of a platelet-rich plasma. I've tried
Sure. Oh wow.
stem cell in there, and that just made it much worse.
Oh
Stem
wow.
cell, amazing stuff for my muscle, for my shoulders, and I think for muscular tears, it's fine. But for this connective tissue and the meniscus, no, the best thing that I found that I was able to do was like a friends and family version of my liniment that I make that's got DMSO in it. So, or you can put the herb on first, but it's like 90% alcohol. So the alcohol evaporates almost, in seconds anyway. It doesn't get pulled in, but you can do that and then let it evaporate and then put on your DMSO. So like 99.9% pure, DMSO, and you get the stuff that's got less of the, whatever it's called, the garlic smell is the ethylene, whatever it's called, the ethylene sulfide or whatever it is that's got the garlic smell to it, that's been removed, so you don't have to worry about the garlic breath. But that will carry it in for sure, and it helps. I used to do that with like a 3% cayenne, and I do like this really intense cayenne extraction in hot alcohol that is just like, it's really, really, it's almost like pure capsaicin probably, and 3% of that and 20% DMSO. And I would find that would really help. But if I didn't have the DMSO, it's just, I don't know, it wasn't working nearly as well.
Well, I tore it last Thanksgiving, and my goal was to play this Thanksgiving, and I do feel like I might be ready to play at least maybe 15 minutes of pickup. So I'll report back and let you know how that goes. Speaking of herbs and injuries, I saw you tell a story on your Instagram account, a story about chaparral. I think the Herb Rally audience would find that interesting if you don't mind sharing that story.
Sure. Yeah. That would have been, if that was recent, that was one that I got a lot of chaparral stories actually, but that one was also early on, kind of for me. Mm-hmm. And chaparral was, again, one of like the 20 herbs I knew at the time almost, and I didn't even really have much of a materia medica yet together or anything. But I was cutting this piece of wood. My wife and I were, at the time, we weren't married yet. We're living together down in Manitou Springs, Colorado. And I'd found this big cottonwood stump, and I was going to make a drum out of it. And so I'm sitting there sawing it with a rough lumber saw, and it just tore right into like kind of just around the thenar eminence of my left hand. And it was a gnarly cut, I mean, you could see the muscle tissue, no connective tissue issues at all, no nerve damage I could tell, but it was bleeding like crazy. It wasn't arterial, but it was bleeding like crazy. So I cleaned it out. And I was like, and I had powdered chaparral there. I was working this little herb store, and that was one of the herbs I brought home, from there. And so I was like, you know what, let's try this. And I'll either be going to the ER tomorrow or we'll see. So I just packed the chaparral in there. So I packed the wound. First time I ever tried doing that. And I don't, it went against everything that I'd learned as a medic to put some form into a wound, right?
Right.
I did that, and then I taped it, and I didn't even have any medical tape available. I remember all I had was some electrical tape that I found. So I taped it shut with that, and then and then like took care not to, to kind of keep it okay, and then slept, and then woke up in the morning and I pulled that off, and it was crazy. It was like all the chaparral, probably whatever wasn't metabolized by my body, just kind of got like, oozed out into this sort of big chaparral scab. A little bit of blood and chaparral all mixed together under the tape. I pulled it off, and I was used a little bit of water, and I got it all off. And that wound was like, it looked like a plastic surgeon had sewn it together like 3 or 4 days before. I mean, it was already, sealed up pretty well. There was no redness. I never had any, problem with redness and infection, anything like that. And I just took care of it, kept it clean. I didn't even bother with, putting anything else on it. It was amazing. So I think as a wound healer, and that's how I first learned about chaparral, was as a wound healer at the time. Yeah.
So you've been doing this for quite a while. Are you still surprised when you see herbs work the way they do?
Not anymore. No,
not anymore. Okay.
Oh my gosh, I've had so many incredible, crazy experiences with herbs that but I'm always very cautiously optimistic with patients. Like I never tell them, I can do this or I can do that. I say, look, I'm trying to be really, there's some things that's just like, okay, here's what I would write. Like, the meniscus for your knee. It's like, honestly, knees over toe is probably going to give you better than anything I could do with herbs. That's how I would say it. But if I think I can, it's like, look, I'm pretty sure I can help you, but let's give it a try first. And let's give it about 3 or 4 weeks and see if we're going down the right road. I think that the key for me in becoming more and more confident has really been that approaching the clinical side from a very much a follow-up centric type of standpoint. So I've always been that way with our clinics. Like we've never been the kind of school that you do like a 2-hour clinic, that's just, to me, is so ludicrous. And the only kind of people you're going to get are the kind of people that can actually afford that, both time and money. And they all kind of have the same digestive issues. And, it's like they're all going to, but we work with folks that are as diverse a crowd as you can possibly get. A lot of people who are, don't have any healthcare, they're underserved. And you're going to see a whole, panoply of different kinds of things with that. And so my goal is like, we got 100 people coming in today, and one of our pop-up clinics.
Oh, wow.
Like maybe 15 minutes. And so I'll have like 3 tables going to say, interns doing their thing and their intake. And then I pop down for 5 minutes in each one. And it's like, what you got? Talk to me. And then boom, here's what I'd say. And then what my goal is there is, how can I make sure that this person is going to walk away from here, and they're going to walk away with the herbs they need from our apothecary right here, in the clinic. And they're going to, after a couple of days, they're going to say, I'm feeling better. And in a week, they're going to be like, I need to go back and see this guy again. So that's what I want. It's like, let's do that 2-hour intake, but let's do it over the course of 2 or 3 months in 15, 20-minute blocks. But, in my teleclinic, I do longer blocks than that. Usually about a half hour to 40 minutes is about what it takes. But with a really, really, really complicated case, it might, it's a 50-minute block. So, but again, it's like, I want to start with you, but I want the follow-up. And so I think that's probably more than anything led to me being really not surprised by the success of herbs in so many crazy areas that, and I've seen people turn around on things that it's changed their lives. I mean, I've not a lot, but I mean, we have a number of students that we've gotten in through the years that have had some kind of a chronic issue that they came to me specifically. And we're like, after messing around and being kicked around for 5 years from doctor to doctor, and then seeing it change, and then it healing, and then saying, I want to learn how to do this now. And that's the best kind of herbalist, in my opinion, is somebody who's overcome something like that and then wants to learn how to do it themselves.
So you have a couple schools. I want to make sure to plug those. That's the Human Path, which is thehumanpath.net.
And, so we have the Human Path, and it's really one school. But
okay, gotcha. Herbalmedics.academy as well, which I want to say you have explained that. Well, why don't you let the audience know the 2 different branches? But I'm also kind of curious. I wasn't going to ask you this. You wear a lot of different hats. What's your favorite thing currently to teach?
Yeah, that's a tough question.
I bet that's for you.
We do, and I kind of could explain it through the path. So it started out as the Human Path was the name of the school, and it just got to the point where a lot of topics were survival, post-disaster, urban post-disaster, wilderness post-disaster, wilderness survival. We had 4 different specialties that you could be, and we still do, each had a name to them. And the medical portion that had to do with herbal medicine was by far became the deepest, the fastest, and by far the most revenue for the school. The most number of students coming in wanted that. And so it was just confusing for people to see, well, you're doing bow drill fires, and then you're making primitive bows over here, and then you're doing scout stuff and sneaking around like ninjas in the woods, and then you got a martial arts thing. Where does herbs fit into this? So we made an entirely different kind of branch that was just Herbal Medics Academy. So you can go, if you get to one, you'll easily get to the other. Totally. But Herbal Medics Academy is really pretty much what we do now. And everything that we did that was based on that kind of stuff, like survival and any of that, all fits into actual practical application now of what we call our medical advanced party class, and teaching people, how do you go into an area that is highly underserved, post-disaster, rural, austere, how do you go into that and prepare for a clinic? Because we do that, and that's really important. Our outreach program is herbalmedics.org. Is we started that in Nicaragua back in, I think, in 2011, and we've been done it all over. We've done it in Mexico, we've done it in all over the US, and we really try to work now, and why we're in Taos, New Mexico, hopefully, to really be able to open up for, again, more of a follow-up and being consistent and being able to work with people over time that are especially in Native American communities. But in that process anyway, what we found was all of those skills, those kind of survival, wilderness first aid, wilderness medicine type skills, are very useful from the standpoint of the advanced party team that has to do a medical reconnaissance. They have to understand our ingress and egress routes. They have to understand a little bit about the security. They have to understand the epidemiology of the culture and the people that we're going to, language issues, cultural things, all that kind of stuff. So it's all very applicable, but it's kind of been, distilled down into being very much medical related now. So my favorite stuff to teach used to really be, we have a wilderness first aid, advanced wilderness first aid, and wilderness first responder program that gets you all the way up to where that ends. And then the austere program starts and says, okay, all of the WFR stuff, if you go to Knowles or Solo or anybody or us, it's all going to be get them to hire, make a decision and, take care of what you can, keep them stabilized, keep them safe and warm and all that, and get them to higher care if it's a higher to care decision. And our austere program is, okay, that's all done. Now there is no higher care. Now what? So that's where the austere program picks up. And that's probably what I enjoy teaching the most because it's the most challenging. How do you do all of these things we're talking about and keep a clean environment? How do you make medicine in the field? How do you make activated charcoal in the field? How do you work with these, how do you put up a clinic and figure out how that's going to happen if it's going to be, say, a medical clinic that might be there for an indeterminate amount of time? How do you make sure that you've got the radio coverage you need? Ham radio is a big part of that. And so all of these things are, in my opinion, are still the basics that I think I love maybe the most. But that said, now that I've really turned my attention to TCM, I'm really looking towards more. I'm looking to write another book, and it'll hopefully maybe together with Kyla, we've talked about a lot.
Oh, nice.
Case study based book that gets you, a little bit of cuisine and a little bit of pathophysiology from Western, a little bit of TCM from the stand that can be translated well. You don't have to have like a degree in order to understand it. And Western herbalism, of course, all of these pieces to be able to go into these specific cases, because we've got hundreds literally to draw from and maybe have, 20 or 30 of the top biggest issues that people face, with in our, clinically as a clinical herbalist or just from home, that you're really serious about it, and be able to put those together. So that portion is very interesting to me, clinical herbalism, while at the same time, my heart really is back with being a special forces medic kind of approach to medicine. I've always felt like that's kind of my roots and what I love the most too, is the wilderness.
For sure. Does Kyla know that she's co-writing this book with you, or is she on the hook now?
We've talked about it many times. It's
Okay.
just a matter of time. Yeah, we're putting together right now we have a botanical functional medicine course, which
By the way, can you define that term? I was going to ask you about that course, but I was kind of curious what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kyla's a family practice doc, and she's board certified in functional medicine. And so the approach of functional medicine is kind of the allopathic answer in a lot of ways to how do you work with, at a cellular level to try to find the cause and the root cause of disease and work with that with your patients, as opposed to just, putting a pharmaceutical Band-Aid on it. And so that's what the botanical functional medicine is her answering that from a perspective of a very experienced, incredible doctor. She's one of the most amazing
Nutritionist too, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So nutrition plays a huge role in that. And so she teaches our nutrition course, which is kind of the doorway into the BFM. But, if you have a nutrition background, you can jump into the BFM and not be completely lost. But then, then there's a piece that she and I have been working together for so long. It's like, she came in and did our HMP course, our introduction for professionals course. And then she's like, this is like going back to med school for me. I don't have time for this, Sam. Can you just be the herbalist? And we worked together. This was 12 years ago. And our relationship has, grown from that standpoint. So we're putting together. So there's really 3 BFM topics. And so we just have done the first one. The one that's coming up is the one we've done every year for about the last 5 or 6 years. And then we're going to do a BFM 2. That's the next chunk, starting in the fall. And of 2024 is the goal. So, it's hard for us to get the time together to do that. But yes, we've been talking about this idea for a book for many years now. And I think it's going to be time pretty soon. I'm finishing up. I have one more book on contract here with Story Publishing. I just finished one called Survival Gardening. It's going to
nice.
About a year. Yeah. My Herbal Medics book is the one, and that's done really well. It's like their top 3 bestsellers for the last 2 years in a row. So I got this Survival Gardening. I got one more that's kind of like a off-grid engineering, water purification, storage and collection, and the hygiene stuff. And once that's done, then I can actually get back to writing what I want to, which is not that I don't want, but where my heart's really, which is the case study book, and I'm going to do a definitive medicine making materia medica book that really gets into the details of like a lot of more advanced medicine making techniques, everything. That's why I have the multifractional classes, which I have the part 1 and part 2 of that now. It's just coming out in a couple of months, or I'm sorry, in a couple of weeks. That gets into also some of the Chinese, the TCM, the things that come to us from Chinese medicine making, but looking at them as a start and then finishing up with some of the different Western stuff. So as we use different solvents and different approaches and different ways of using heat and how we do that and put everything together. So I'd like to have a book that's really definitive on that and has a really definitive reference for people to say, hey, what percentage should I use for this yarrow? Is a maceration tincture fresh going to be different from a dried perk tincture? And how about if I go to this multifrac thing, what's that going to do? To be able to look it up and say, here's what I've found and here's what I would recommend. And if you're going to do a multifrac, let's do water first and do alcohol second. And it should be these percentages of each of your different solvents in there and so forth. It's just like a lookup chart, along with, a little short explanation as to why and some of the different constituent theory around these as well. So I know that's a big book coming, at some point too, it's probably a few years out at least.
Well, and congrats on the success of Herbal Medic. I saw someone post about that recently. I also saw that it's on audio. I know Herbal Medic is probably a very good reference book. Do you see any benefits to someone purchasing the audiobook, presuming you've listened to it?
I've only listened to a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not that thrilled with the narrator. Unfortunately. And it's supposed to be translated into at least 1 or 2 other languages, I believe, too. They have all in their contract. But I don't know. I mean, for me, I would say probably not, because it's so much easier to visually go and
right.
Zip around from place to place. It's much easier to do that.
That was just a decision of the publisher. They decided to put it on audio.
I think that the way it works is, and it's hard. It doesn't really happen with nonfiction that much. But what happens is, like, these different audio companies out there, they'll put a bid and they'll say, "Hey, we'll buy the rights to be able to do this from you," and then that's what happens.
Well, hopefully you're seeing some of the residuals from that sale. Oh, yeah. I would imagine. Yeah. I want to be sure to get this guest question, so I put it out to the Herb Rally audience on the newsletter. Someone got back to me. So this is from Debbie McSweeney. And they ask, as an herbalist and teacher, I'm seeing more people shying away from wanting any mainstream medical assistance in serious situations. They ask for herbal help, but I often feel it is serious enough that they need emergency assistance. What do you do in situations like that? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's the eternal question, I think, that every herbalist needs to ask themselves. So a lot of it has to do, again, with your recognition of that. So how good are you at recognizing this? And do you have experience with working for that? I have probably worked with strep throat, for instance, I don't know, 20, 30 times with people that refused higher care, didn't want higher care. And so that's a good example. What I would do from the very beginning is like, this needs higher care. You need antibiotics. This isn't a joke, Eventually your body you'll think it goes away, but this is a really serious, going to be a lifetime issue that you could be dealing with. And then them saying, yeah, but like for instance, this one woman is just like, first of all, didn't have healthcare insurance, couldn't afford it at all, and did not trust it. Some really serious issues that had happened to her to make her lack of trust pretty strong with the allopathic world. Anyway, my response was, okay, look, I'm going to start. And we had caught it early, fortunately. It was like, first couple of days. I said, if you aren't turning around, if your symptoms do not turn around in 24 hours, I mean, like significantly turn around in the next 24 hours, then I'll drive you there myself, but you've got to go,
Yeah.
That's one way.
Absolutely. So you and Suchel have been co-owners of this business for quite some time, from what I can tell. I'm just kind of curious. Another selfish question for me. Do you have any advice on growing a business with your spouse?
Yeah, it's an undertaking for sure. Yeah, I think that I joke about this all the time. When I first met Suchel, she was waiting tables at this little kind of a bar and grill where I would stop. I didn't have a car at the time. I was living on the post in the beginning of the Special Forces Medic course. It was called the 300F1 in San Antonio at the time, not anymore, but at the time it was on Fort Sam Houston. And I would bike over to this little university, this little private university, Trinity University, to use the library because it was quiet there and I could study. And on the way, directly on the way, was this little bar and grill on Broadway Street, crossing over. And that's how I met Suchel. And so about, I don't know, couple of months when I kind of got up the courage to talk to her, because I was just like, the minute I saw her, I was like, oh my God, that's the one.
That's awesome.
At that time, and I did never really experienced that feeling, but it was. And so I asked her on a date to like just go a bike ride. I don't know if you call it a date, but says, let's go on a bike ride. So we went down to this little place and for lunch kind of thing. And I just like vomited out all of my ideas about what this school was. And this was when I was still like 27, so it was about 1990.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, it was all in my head. I knew what I wanted to do even then. And I just like, that was our entire lunch, was just me talking about like, here's all the pieces to it and here's how it would fit together. And then I got back and I was like, oh my God, that was pretty stupid. She probably will never want to talk to me again. Anyway, that was kind of, I guess, what's the word? You know, it was sort of a little bit of a shadowing of foreshadowing. But then the point where I was able to really do it when it started in San Antonio, she was working her own, working as well. But after a couple of years of me starting that up, she started cooking for the thing. And in the meantime, she had done that once before. I taught like plant walks and medicine making and stuff for somebody else, for a different school out of Boulder, for just like a couple different summers. And she cooked for those, and so she felt really comfortable with that. She's a great cook. And so she came down to this property, and we didn't even have an indoor kitchen. It was all outdoor kitchen, just, basically canopies and tents and stuff back then, and did that work. That was like thankless work. And then over time, just like over the next couple of years, started to really become more a part of it. And then it just, to the point where we both just jumped into a full time, to where we were putting in, we probably each put in 70 to 80 hours a week for
Wow.
365 days a year for the first 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
People say, "Oh, you start your own business. You got to work the first couple of years." Like, we worked the first decade that way almost.
Yeah.
It took that much time to get the momentum on something like this. It's so different. It's it's just a different thing. It's its own niche that we kind of created. So there's been, I think, some real ups and downs in that for us, mainly because of the amount of time. It was like, we always joked about it being our little, kind of like our special needs child or something that we had to, nurse and nurse along and make it grow and all that. And it took everything, so it took away from our relationship as well. Yeah, I think, so we weren't probably communicating. We definitely weren't. So we went through some definite dips in that because of the fact that we weren't able to spend that time. And we didn't even realize that. That's the problem, I think, is when you're working as kind of a power couple and doing something like that, you don't even realize how much time you're not spending actually together, but you're working. And I couldn't imagine a better business partner than Suchel. I mean, she's like, we are both very task oriented, just say it that way.
Sure.
And so, the mix of that has been incredible synergy. It's like, it's not just two of us. It's like there's four of us because of the amount we've done. But that said, it's also, it can be very detrimental, I think, to a relationship over time, because you start to take a lot of things for granted and you stop communicating like you should be. That's probably.
Yeah. Your conversations all revolve around what the next project is and whatnot.
Always, what's going on today? What are we going to get done? We just, we got some upset students about this. We got some people that wrote these amazing, testimonials and emails about this, and this program's doing great. This one's not so good. We got an instructor over here we're going to have to talk to. Those kinds of things. All just, you're doing everything. You're wearing every single hat. When it's a small business like that, and it's still a small business, although. We have the store as well. We have our apothecary that used to be a formulary for like docs and NPs that wanted to be able to buy my formulas, and it became kind of a public facing store. So it's herbalfirstaidgear.com. And that's
nice.
Incredibly well as well over the time.
I'll include a link in the show notes. I didn't realize you had that store as well. Yes. What prompted the move from San Antonio to Taos?
Sucha's mother passed, and then we didn't really have anything else holding us in San Antonio. And I really
Gotcha.
wanted to get back to the mountains. And so it was like Colorado or New Mexico, northern New Mexico. This is the same, the Sangre de Cristo range here that we're living in now. It's the same range I spent a lot of time on, around in the Colorado side, on the wet valley side of it. And so I love this range. I love, everything about being back at altitude in the mountains. And it was, kind of came down. We did a whole bunch of kind of recon trips, thought a lot, like we're going to move somewhere, but we don't know where. We thought about Oregon, thought even about Northern California, thought about, the Southwest, of course, is kind of where my heart's always been. And so it came down to really, after you go through Taos a few times, it's like, this is kind of like an Adobe version of what Manitou Springs used to be when we lived there. And we loved that so much. So that's where we ended up here. And it's a destination location, a lot better, a lot more so than San Antonio is. So it's a lot easier to get students to come out for our hands-on stuff that we do here, because it's like, I can hang out and they can camp on the property here, or they can get a Airbnb or whatever they want. And then at night or in the evening after class, they can go down and hang out in town. And there's just so much to do and see, and mountain biking trails, whatever they want. And we back on national forest here too. We're in the mountains here. And so our property is a really special piece of property too.
I'll have to check it out someday. And in Oregon, were you looking at, like, say, Eastern Oregon, where it's more dry?
No, more kind of Western and in the more areas down, like just like one side or the other of the coastal range there, kind of in that area. As you start to get down in some of those areas, are really beautiful and so fertile if you wanted to grow.
Did you know that I'm an Oregonian, or I'm from Oregon? Yeah. I grew up in Eugene, Oregon. So I spent the first 38 years of my life there. I live in Wisconsin now. But yeah, I'm an Oregonian through and through for sure. Couple more.
My family.
What's that?
Well, so technically our family comes from Eastern Oregon, from Milton, Freewater.
Oh, wow.
Area in Walla Walla.
Okay.
So that's kind of where all of our original family's from. And then I've got my son went to, Eugene, to
U of O.
U of O, and one brother at south of Corvallis, and my sister on Beaverton. So Oregon is kind of home for some of my family.
You're familiar with it. Got it. Do you have any advice for the aspiring herbal entrepreneur? You seem like a great person to ask.
Pick what you're good at. I think, pick what, and find a niche that nobody else is really doing in that. So you don't have to sit and try to, compete with the 2,000 people making elder syrup every year. So find something that your heart's at. I think plant medicine is non-linear. I mean, you really have to approach it from the heart and from the intuition. And the more you use your intuition, the better you get at it. So I would say trust that, and then don't be afraid to put the work in. Once you've figured out what that is.
Such a great answer. You mentioned knees over toes guy, which I'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well. He's got a great YouTube channel. Do you have any other recommendations on how someone could get started with, say, functional fitness?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. That's near and dear to my heart as well. I was just typing in the store link there for you.
Oh, thank you.
So the risk of sounding like an old boomer or something, I was doing functional fitness before it was cool,
Totally. And barefoot running too.
Yeah. Oh man, barefoot running, and that saved my life.
I'm all about that life too. Barefoot running.
Good for you.
Yep.
Yeah. My knees were so shot after the military, and I just couldn't even run like more than a couple of miles without pain. And then I picked up that book. It's called Chi Running, way back when it came out. That was like back in the early 2000s, I think.
Sounds about
right. When I decided to go to med school, I took a job downtown Denver, and then I could go to school across the street nights at the Beret campus. And we lived in Lakewood up around like Wadsworth and Colfax. So it was like there was a green belt. Now it's all the what do you call it? The train line there. But at the time it was just this like kind of a green belt that went all the way down on the old train tracks. So I literally walked like 6.1. It was like exactly 10K down and 10K back. And I did all my studying for my MCAT, for my everything by flashcards and recordings and stuff down and back. And it was that, and running and walking, barefoot running, and teaching myself kind of how to run forefoot running better, and getting, of course, back then they didn't have barefoot shoes, but finding shoes that were sort of like that, that really saved my knees then. I think military functional fitness has always been a part of, my life since I went into special forces, where, you had to be able to swim, you had to be able to run, you had to be able to even bike, you had to be able to, understand how to climb ropes, you had to be able to do obstacles, you had to be able to shoot, you had to be able to shoot under stress. And when you're like completely winded, you had to be able to, carry 70 to 100 pounds on your back. All of those things I think are very, are near and dear to my heart for, understanding the body from a standpoint of many different things. And I think that now it's a lot easier to get into that. And like things like just as simple as having some kettlebells can take you a long way in that. A kettlebells, a rope, a climbing rope, maybe 1.5 inches climbing rope, and pull-up bar, and you're set. I mean, you can do so much with that. You don't need any expensive weights beyond something like that.
Yeah, I'd argue pull-ups might be like the best exercise you could possibly do. Would you agree? Something similar to that?
I love pull-ups for sure. Yeah, for sure. I used to be into rock climbing way back when, and I don't have the body or the weight for it anymore. I was like 170. But it's but the same idea, of just being the pull-up idea is really, I think, a very strong. I love pull-up bars for sure too.
Heck yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you for joining me for this hour, Sam. Let's we'll leave links to Herbal Medics, all the above, Human Path, your books and your store and whatnot. Any upcoming projects you want to share, or anything you're excited about, and any closing thoughts?
We do have a new program. We have 5 programs now instead of 4. They are the clinical herbalism program, the advanced medicine making or apothecaries program, the austere medicine program, which includes, of course, WFA and WFR, the family medicine program, which includes, if you want it, doula certification. It's all, prenatal, postpartum, family, pediatric herbalism, all of those pieces. And now, just because the clinical herbalism program is really extensive, and some people just don't have the time to put into it, we have what we call the community herbalism program, which allows people also to pick kind of a path. Do you want more urban? Do you want more rural? Do you want to just go ahead and cherry pick, kind of a la carte what pieces you want? You have to take a certain number of core and elective credits off of that to get that. So really happy about all of that going on right now, and all the pieces are coming. We're having a new geriatric herbalism course that'll be coming out next year. We have a brand new Spanish herbalism course that's all Spanish. It's taught by Michael, and it's taught in a bilingual setting. But the idea is that all the lectures are in Spanish, and the Q&A is in Spanish, to get people, even if you so that way, like herbalists who already have the herbal knowledge, because it's just a very basic, it's our introduction for beginners course. But so you already have that herbal knowledge, so it's a lot easier now for you to jump in and say, okay, now I get to learn these things in Spanish and talk about them in Spanish, or for people who are just not English speakers but are starting at the very beginning as well. So that's kind of a new thing as well. That's awesome. And then we just every year, we come out with new stuff. We're going to do tactical emergency combat care certification probably this next summer, and make that part of what we call our home course for the following year. And so lots of new stuff always coming out if you just kind of keep an eye on what we're on our page.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Thank you, Sam. Yeah, and I'll have to have a Suchel on the show at some point, get her side of things. So that'd be fantastic. But we'll wrap it up here. Thanks, y'all, for watching / listening. And thanks, Sam, once again for joining us. We'll see you in the next episode of the Herbalist Hour. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our Herbal YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an Herbal Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbal.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our Herbal Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herbal.com/schoolhouse, enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.